It all starts with the chaos triggered by terrorism, which is devastating the world. Ever since people begin awakening diverse powers, terrorist attacks have become constant. Because the government couldn't handle the situation, ordinary citizens without powers started hiring bodyguards. And among all these defenders, one person emerged who stood out completely from the rest. There was a legendary bodyguard known to everyone as the strongest in history. The name of this incredibly powerful and respected man is Ryushin. He has protected many important wealthy individuals and has never failed in any of his escort missions. His success rate in protecting his targets is an impressive 248%. The reason for all this incredible success is revealed during a meeting of local criminals. A level C terrorist named Hire shows a poster of an idol named Rai, who will be their next target. Another criminal named Hesk thinks that taking out a simple singer will be an easy job to do. They start arguing about silly details about the girl until someone tells them to stop that conversation. The two continue grumbling about the point, the measurements of someone who is about to be eliminated. But Hire soon warns that there is a major problem in the way of carrying out the planned act. He reveals that the girl's personal bodyguard is none other than the feared and dangerous Rayoshin. Hesk's expression changes immediately upon hearing the name, and he says he has already heard many rumors about him. He asks if his partner has ever seen him in person, and what kind of special ability the bodyguard possesses. Hire replies that legends say he can perfectly use any weapon that exists in the world. The speed of the revelation leaves the criminals intrigued and a little fearful about what they are going to face. Suddenly, a mysterious voice emerges in the room, calling both men cowards without hesitation. The new person in the room mocks the situation, saying that in the end, he is just an ordinary bodyguard. She is Nader, a dangerous class of terrorist who sees bodyguards only as meat shields. She thinks it is impossible for a simple human being to be able to carry all the weapons in the world around with them. Nader guarantees that she will send both the singer and the protector straight to the bad place when the time comes. But before they could continue the plan, a devastating blue explosion destroys the wall of their room. A curtain of smoke spreads through the environment, while the villains start coughing desperately. Totally frightened, they try to see through the dust and notice an imposing figure approaching. The terrorists are completely confused about what is happening there in their secret hideout. Nader widens her eyes as she notices the intimidating presence that just invaded the premises without permission. From the middle of the rebel, the cold and intimidating figure of the legendary protector they feared so much emerges. Rayoshin himself appears with his striking red eyes glowing intensely in the midst of the darkness. The criminals fall into despair as they see the strongest man in the world enter the hideout so easily. While they prepare their powers to attack, his unique protection philosophy begins to be explained. Rayoshin simply throws his high-tech briefcase into the air, completely ignoring the desperate question of his rivals. The briefcase begins to disassemble in the air and release a massive amount of bright blue energy. He activates hammer mode to ensure that danger never gets close to his client in any way. With a single, overwhelming blow from his giant hammer, he throws the enemies far away with violence. His method consists of eliminating any threat before it can even begin to act against the target. Rayoshin looks back calmly after finishing off everyone, reaffirming that he is only doing his professional duty. Down on the ground and spitting blood, Nader complains, telling him not to joke around by calling himself just a bodyguard. She faints, defeated, knowing that in reality, this man is much more like a ruthless professional. The young man catches the handle of his briefcase in the air with extreme precision after completing another job successfully. He announces that the objective was reached, raising his success rate to an impressive 249%. Using this unconventional protection method, he continues working to keep his clients totally safe. Meanwhile, in a gigantic arena full of lights and fans, the idol's show is about to start for real. Someone contacts Ryuushin to wish him a good night, while the crowd waves their blue light sticks. However, in an isolated place, several mysterious figures wearing traditional costumes wield wooden sticks. Ryuushin appears sitting on the ground, apparently tired, surrounded by these strange people who cornered him. The group's leader introduces herself as Neo, a department head of the feared tragedy criminal organization. She reveals herself to be an extremely dangerous Class S terrorist, ready to face the famous protector. Ryuushin murmurs seriously while observing his opponents with a tired look, fed up with that whole uncomfortable situation. He admits that he still has a long way to go, since he thought he had eliminated everyone who would try to ruin the show. Neo clarifies quickly that her group's objective is not the singer, but the legendary Bodyguard himself. Surprised to learn that he is the real target, the protector hears the girl say she wants to ask a question before anything else. She asks directly for the reason he chooses to protect his clients using such extreme and violent combat methods. He repeats the question out loud reflectively. He begins to recall his memories of the distant past. It all began back when he had just joined the agency and received the mission to escort a female musical group. The biggest dream of those young idols was to make people all over the world able to hear and love their music. The big day of their first performance was finally before everyone's eyes after much effort and rehearsals. As that was also his first mission, he swore in his heart that he would protect them with absolutely everything he had. However, even knowing the location and identity of the enemies, his superior decided to wait for them to attack first. Worried about the strategy adopted, the young man asked his boss if that passive attitude would really work. He suggested that they invade the enemy heading out immediately to neutralize the danger before any attack. The boss only laughed, calling him an idiot and reminding him that they were just simple bodyguards and not professionals. She told the rookie to stop giving advice to his superiors and let her take care of everything on her own from then on. However, because they chose to wait passively for the enemy attack, a terrible tragedy ended up happening. Rai was on the ground crying desperately while holding the lifeless body of one of her dear companions. The other members of the musical group also ended up passing away in a brutal way in that fateful surprise attack. In tears, the poor girl lamented the loss of all her friends without being able to accept that terrible reality. Ryuushin stood still observing the devastating scene while apologizing from the bottom of his soul for the great failure. That night under the full moon marked the young man's life forever with an immense feeling of guilt and regret. Sometime later, he was isolated in a dark hallway when his boss appeared to talk to the rookie. He said he was keeping his head down because he failed miserably in the mission to protect the girls as he had promised. The young man lamented a lot for having made such a grave mistake in his very first practical job at the security company. The boss, however, asked what he was talking about, since in the end, they managed to keep Rai alive and safe. She explained coldly that those other girls in the musical group didn't have the money to pay for professional protection. The girls had pooled all the savings they possessed to manage to hire only one bodyguard to help them. The amount of money collected by them was enough to cover only the protection costs for a single person. Since Rai was the one responsible for handing over the payment, the mission was technically considered a complete commercial success. She then told him to stop lamenting, since the contractual duty of the security company was totally fulfilled. From that fateful day on, the young man's mind was consumed by a deep sadness that he tried to drown in drink. He started wandering the city streets every night, living as if he were just an empty shell with no direction in life. However, on an ordinary night while walking aimlessly, a familiar sound coming from the street caught his attention immediately. Looking to the side, he saw Rai singing on the sidewalk with her guitar, fighting bravely to move forward. The young man was totally shocked to realize that even after going through that terrible tragedy, she didn't give up on music. The young lady continued performing with a bright look, full of determination to realize the dream of her friends. She kept a photo of the old group in a locket to remind herself to keep fighting for the dream of all of them together. By observing that girl's willpower, the former bodyguard finally found a new purpose for his own life. He decided he would do everything to ensure a cruel tragedy like that would never happen to any client ever again. The young man made a solemn promise that he would hunt and eliminate all the threats hidden in this cruel world. Neo finds the story moving and finally understands the reason behind the young man's aggressive protection method. He stands up and asks what she really wants there, since it is evident that she didn't come just to watch Ri's show. Ryushin asks about Tragedy, the famous and gigantic criminal organization that spreads terror wherever it goes. The villain confirms that she is indeed part of the most dangerous and influential terrorist group that operates in the city's shadows. She explains quite calmly that she came to the location as an official representative of the feared organization. Neo reaches out towards the protector and reveals that she has an unrefusable business proposal to make to him today. The young man is quite suspicious of that sudden attitude and asks what this partnership offer is about. She promises that if he joins the group, none of them will touch Rai, in exchange for the protector stopping his hunt for criminals. Neo reminds him that he will never be able to eliminate all the threats in the world, because new dangers will always arise in the shadows. She concludes by saying that it would be much smarter to work together with those he can at least negotiate with. Neo waits anxiously with her hand extended, hoping for a definitive response to her alliance offer. She asks directly if the protector has ever heard a certain popular saying very well known in their world. Ryushin replies coldly, saying that they simply do not negotiate with any kind of terrorist. Irritated by the immediate refusal, the villain calls him an idiot while her henchmen prepare for combat. She orders everyone to attack without mercy, decreeing that the fate of that cheeky protector will be the end. The young man counters the provocation by asking who she thinks she is dealing with by calling him an idiot. He questions if the criminals really know where they are standing at that exact moment of the battle. Suddenly, a strange vibration starts to spread through the floor, frightening the henchmen who were advancing. In the blink of an eye, all the power in the location is completely cut off, leaving the environment in total darkness. The criminals fall into despair upon realizing they cannot see absolutely anything around them. The henchmen start shouting for their leader while she wields her metal stick in the middle of the pitch black darkness. To illuminate the location, the villain uses her powers to make her stick burn in intense flames. She orders everyone at the top of her lungs to stay calm and maintain the combat formation so they aren't surprised. However, looking to the side, she is in shock to see that all her allies have already been knocked out on the ground. Not understanding how that happened so quickly, she lets out a frightened scream, faced with that bizarre situation. All of this is done strategically to clear the area, even before the singer gets on stage for the show. Suddenly, the protector emerges from the shadows, advancing against the criminal leader with overwhelming speed. Turning off the arena's breakers is a standard tactic of his to completely dominate adversaries in the darkness. The girl is hit squarely by a massive electric shock without having time to show any defensive reaction. The protector's powerful blow throws the powerful terrorist far away with simply absurd force. She spits blood due to the devastating impact of the direct attack that totally broke her guard. The villain is launched violently against the stage structures, which break with the force of the collision. Down and injured, she realizes with irritation that he was only talking to buy time and set the trap. Upon facing the young man's ruthless gaze, she calls him a demon due to his frightening coldness in combat. Ryushin walks calmly towards his opponent while his briefcase begins to accumulate blue electric energy again. The protector warns seriously that from that moment on, he is classifying the young terrorist as a threat. He activates his weapons brass knuckles mode and declares coldly that he will eliminate her to ensure everyone's safety. Blue energy surrounds the hero's fists, creating an atmosphere of pure pressure and deadly danger for the villain. Even cornered, she smiles sarcastically upon hearing the almost impossible objective he wishes to achieve. The young man is not shaken by the provocation and remains focused on performing his work with surgical precision. Neo is totally enraged and screams for him not to be so smug before trying one last desperate attack. She advances with everything, wielding her stick wrapped in colossal flames to try to crush her opponent once and for all. The villain questions if he really believes that just one person alone is capable of eliminating all the evil in the world. She tells the hero to save his naive fantasies for when he is asleep, because that dream will never come true. With her strength totally released, she wields a gigantic weapon wrapped in red flames of pure hatred. The terrorist screams that his dream is nothing but an infantile illusion of a fool, completely out of touch with reality. But the hero responds to the attack with an overwhelming punch that breaks the sound barrier with a deafening impact. The direct and precise punch hits the opponent's chest squarely, interrupting her strike and dissipating all the flames. She falls defeated in front of the main stage, while the event organizers watch everything from afar, shocked, completely knocked out. The villain moans in pain, fallen on the concrete without the strength to even try to get up again. A boy from the team confuses the fallen giant weapon with a giant light stick, creating a very comical situation at the scene. The hero takes a step forward, realizing that perhaps he exaggerated a bit in the strength of the blow dealt against her. He admits calmly that he miscalculated his own strength when throwing that final punch at the criminal group's leader. The young terrorist only looks at him in absolute silence with a look of total disbelief after being surpassed so easily. Ryuushin reflects on her criticism and admits that in the beginning, he also thought Ri's dream was a mere naive fantasy, but that determined girl's actions proved to him that it was possible to change things for real with effort. She had said that if people helped each other one at a time, perhaps that dream one day would become real. The young man pondered the immense amount of inhabitants in the world, but the singer had a brilliant answer in mind. She explained that instead of just staying around talking and theorizing, the most important thing was to actually act to make a difference. With a beautiful smile, Ri concluded by saying that nobody ever knows what will happen until they truly try with their heart. She started by performing for only 10 people on small stages with much simplicity and dedication. With the passing of time, her audience grew to dozens, and then hundreds of passionate fans. And now she finally performs before a gigantic arena with thousands of people screaming her name. Ryuushin realizes from the crowd's vibration that it is almost time for the young singer to take the main stage. He believes that if he continues eliminating the threats one by one, he will manage to rid the world of all dangers. Neo counters the idea, telling him not to be ridiculous, because new threats will always continue arising without stopping. She states categorically that it is impossible to eliminate all the criminals in the world definitively. The villain insists on her partnership proposal, saying that it would be much smarter for him to join her group. Ryuushin smiles slightly and says that that is something nobody will ever know until they truly try with their heart. The hero mocks, telling the boy from the team to wave the blue light stick and enjoy Ri's big show. The boy grumbles silently with his eyes closed, because the whole situation left him quite irritated. The almost absurd promise to protect absolutely everyone echoes remarkably in the hero's mind. The villain bites her lips with anger, stating that there is no possibility of something so perfect happening. She promises that she will make understand the harsh reality in the worst possible way right there at that exact moment. The girl floats in the air, concentrating an immense amount of magical energy to unleash a final attack. The young man remains firm in his position while he observes the colossal power that is about to collapse upon him. His red eyes glow intensely with the accumulated energy, indicating that he is also ready to act. A thunderous explosion of blue energy takes over the scenery, generating extremely violent air pressure. She declares from up high that his hopes are nothing but empty words without any practical meaning. The villain screams that she will blow up the entire stadium, destroying the young man's dream and also the young singer's at once. A colossal sphere of destructive energy is thrown towards the ground with the objective of pulverizing everything. The young man warns that he will not allow this and activates the surprising cheer stick mode of his equipment. He remembers his old sacred oath of never letting such a horrible tragedy happen again. He jumps forward at high speed, initiating an extremely agile and precise counterattack movement. The hero jumps towards the gigantic magical sphere without showing any bit of fear faced with imminent end. He says that that blue fire attack is the perfect size to look like a special effect for the show's opening. The young man holds his bright weapon firmly in the air, concentrating all his power to counter his opponent's assault. An immense beam of blue light is fired, tearing through the darkness of the stadium with incomparable destructive power. The energy is dissipated in the skies brilliantly, perfectly imitating the fireworks of a great party. The villain is left totally paralyzed in the air upon seeing that her most powerful strike was easily nullified by the hero. Meanwhile, Ri's long, shiny white hair starts to move softly with the stage breeze. The young singer walks with confident steps towards the center of the arena under the production's blue spotlights. She looks up, amazed at the beautiful light effect the hero just created with his attack in the sky. In the audience, the fans observe the starry sky and the bright light show with looks of pure admiration and surprise. Rai smiles softly upon realizing that everything is going perfectly thanks to her protector's tireless effort. The cheer stick glows intensely, symbolizing hope and the beginning of a new era full of peace and music. The hero starts to descend slowly towards the ground after performing his mission with mastery and technical perfection. He lands softly near the defeated leader, maintaining the firm posture of someone who completed their professional duty. The young idol observes the horizon with determination, shining like the true star she was born to be. She gives a light and sweet smile, preparing to sing and enchant the crowd of fans who are waiting anxiously. The entire audience starts screaming with emotion, with posters and banners declaring their eternal love for the famous singer. She raises her gloved hand towards the skies to give the start signal for her first and remarkable song of today. The idol shouts into the microphone, asking if everyone is finally ready for the biggest night of their lives in the arena. The public responds with a deafening roar of joy, while the stage lights dance in tune with the music. Many fans are deeply moved, even crying with happiness upon seeing their great star shine on stage. Fallen on the ground and completely defeated, the villain observes the spectacle without managing to say a single word of fury. The hero looks at her and asks calmly if she finally managed to come to her senses after receiving the blow's impact. He tells the girl not to try to get up and just sit beside him to enjoy the show in complete peace. He points to the illuminated stage and asks if the singer performing so brilliantly isn't truly beautiful. Meanwhile, the boy from the team waves the giant red flame stick joyfully as if it were a toy. Neo remains in absolute silence while she tries to process the humiliating defeat she just suffered. She says with disdain that passing away at their hands would have been much easier than the fate that awaits her now. She warns that since the negotiations failed, both he and the singer are now on the radar of the worst terrorists. Faced with this imminent threat from such a dangerous group, she asks what he plans to do to survive. The hero focuses his determined gaze on the villain, showing that he does not fear any of the criminals in that organization. Meanwhile, on the main stage, Rai sings joyfully and enchants the entire audience present with her wonderful voice. He states with conviction that he will continue doing exactly the same protection work he has always performed with mastery. The scenery then changes suddenly to Naftaful, a city famous for being the hideout of many criminals. A group of local warriors waits anxiously to know if that is really the correct location for the ambush. A hand holds the bright high-tech briefcase firmly, indicating that the moment of action finally started there. Rayoshin emerges with Neo captured and asks if that is the city that the tragedy organization supposedly dominated completely. He prepares for imminent combat while keeping the prisoner totally under his control and constant vigilance. The local criminals are completely furious with the sudden invasion and ask who the heck that daring man is. Ryushin only warns that his protection service starts at that exact moment and prepares to unleash his power. The entire horde of criminals advances, with everything violently to try to crush the invader without any hesitation. He moves with extreme agility, dodging the henchman's attacks in an incredibly fast and stylish way. Nio, who remains tied up and gagged, tries to grumble while observing all that insane beating from up close. The hero activates his weapon's hammer mode to annihilate the enemy forces with extremely powerful blows. Three formidable opponents attempt a combined and coordinated attack to try to break his impenetrable defense. But with a single circular movement of his colossal hammer, he unleashes a devastating blue shockwave. The violent impact throws several adversaries far away, leaving the floor covered with defeated and fallen enemies. The ease with which he defeated the whole group leaves the bandit leader completely speechless and paralyzed. He screams furiously, asking what the hero thinks he is doing by invading their territory with such violence. The young man ignores his opponent's fury and asks if they cannot see what is right before their eyes. He states with total seriousness that everything he just did is part of his standard, extreme protection work. The criminals look at each other totally confused and sweating coldly, unable to understand the logic of that bizarre reasoning. One of them comments that the rumors were really right, and that the famous bodyguard isn't quite right in the head. The leader smokes his cigar calmly and questions that carnage actually looks like protection to any normal person. He is Ostium, the gatekeeper of Naftafel, and a very dangerous class S terrorist, according to records. Ryuushin counters without hesitation, stating that for him, all the criminals present there are nothing but pure imminent risk. He explains that he prefers to eliminate all of them now, before they decide to become a real threat to his clients. One of the henchmen tries to advance with anger, but the powerful Ostium makes a hand signal ordering him to wait a bit. The experienced gatekeepers says he would like to ask a crucial question before they start the real combat. He wants to know how the hero managed to locate that secret hideout while the prisoner moans nervously on the ground. Nio looks away and starts sweating coldly upon realizing that her secret is about to be revealed to her allies. He highlights that that location is an absolute secret that not even the members of his own security agency knew about. She tries to justify herself uselessly through the gag while her face turns completely red with shame. The hero removes the prisoner's gag so she can breathe and tell the truth in front of all her partners. She starts laughing hysterically and desperately, trying to hide her immense guilt for giving up the location. Ryushin only stares at her with a confused look, not understanding the reason for all that scandalous and bizarre reaction from the villain. Ostium remembers with pride that that location is the only entrance to the city center and is heavily guarded by elites. He proudly states that in the entire history, he never let any intruder pass through that impenetrable gate alive. The criminal leader says that the only reason they revealed the location was to turn that hideout into the hero's tomb. Nio also screams with confidence, saying that her powerful companions will crush the protector without any difficulty. But the atmosphere of confidence is broken when the experienced Ostium catches her attention with a very serious tone of voice. The powerful warrior stares at her with a frightening look and asks if she has completely lost her mind. He accuses her of having given up the location of their own secret hideout just to manage to save her own skin. The leader also asks where all the subordinates are, who should be fighting and protecting the base's security. Very awkwardly, she confesses that all of them ended up being captured and taken straight to Ri's show arena. Rayoshin asks her if she also sold out her own subordinates, but she denies it, saying that all of them were caught together. Ostium says with contempt that she is trash that gives a terrible reputation even to the worst villains in the region. He decrees coldly that as soon as he finishes dealing with Ryushin, she will be executed immediately right there at the base. The revelation leaves the girl completely horrified, unable to believe the cruel fate that awaits her. She despairs totally upon realizing that her own life is in extreme danger after having made that stupid choice. Nio confesses in her mind that she really believed her allies would be capable of massacring the powerful protector. She realizes with dread that if the famous bodyguard ends up losing that fight, she will also pass away right after. Ryushin looks at her with mockery and comments that it seems that her own companions really don't stand her at all. She tries to argue by saying pathetically that it's all just a terrible misunderstanding between guild companions. The other henchmen scream with hatred, promising to rip her horns off and use them brutally as punishment. In tears, she hears her old allies say that she was always extremely annoying because of her flashy clothes. They continue the insults, saying that she is just a ridiculous fraud who shouldn't even wear that hairstyle. Impressed by the level of grudge, the hero asks what she did to be so hated by her own work partners, Sobbing and trembling with fear, she observes the bloodthirsty looks directed at her from all parts of the room. Desperate, the girl begs silently for the hero to hold on firm and manage to beat all of them in battle. Ostium decides to give an ultimatum to the hero, saying he is willing to offer one single and valuable chance to him. He demands that the protector just hand over the traitor in exchange for permission to leave there completely unharmed. She begs the young man not to believe their words, remembering with despair that terrorists never keep promises. The hero remains thoughtful, observing all that dramatic discussion with a totally cold and calculating look. Upon seeing the sincere tears in the girl's eyes, he lets out a light reflective grumble before making his final decision. The hero scratches his head in a relaxed way, pretending that he is very undecided about which attitude to take at that moment. He lies shamelessly, saying that there are too many enemies and that he sees no possibility of winning that battle alone. The hero grabs her hair and says that perhaps it is better to accept the peace agreement proposed by the gang leader. Neo screams desperately, stating that he is indeed capable of winning, since he defeated a Class S-level opponent easily. He counters, saying that if he fights to save her, he will be acting as a bodyguard who protects a feared terrorist. The girl argues in a hilarious way, saying that even terrorists possess the right to hire personal bodyguards. Leaving the joking aside, the hero leans over to hold the handle of his powerful combat briefcase again. He remembers seriously that she technically isn't even an official client who made some kind of payment to him. The young man starts turning around to leave the location, abandoning the villain to her own fate before her old allies. The young lady is completely left in the lurch upon realizing that her only savior is about to leave her behind without mercy. Seeing that the bodyguard is going to withdraw, the bloodthirsty henchmen advance in her direction with their sharp weapons. They scream furiously that all traitors to the organization must receive the end as severe punishment. The criminals jump in the direction of the helpless girl, who lets out a scream of absolute dread upon seeing the blade approach. She continues screaming desperately for the hero's name, begging for help in the last second of her life. The young man looks askance from the corner of his eyes, observing the girl fighting for her life in the middle of the henchman's attack. At the limit of despair, she screams with all her strength that she is officially hiring the hero as her protector. Upon hearing the official request for hiring, the protector stops his walking immediately, demonstrating interest in the proposal. He displays a half smile and asks what will be the method of payment offered for this new escort service. She offers all the amount of money he desires, but the hero quickly refuses, saying he has no interest in money. The hero displays a bright digital holographic screen, revealing what he really wants to receive in exchange for his help. The girl observes the floating screen with eyes brimming with tears, trying to understand the terms of that sudden contract. The document demands that she hand over absolutely all the secret information she possesses about the criminal organization. The protector confirms with a smile on his face that he wants every small detail she knows about the terrible tragedy. She is totally horrified upon reading the clause, knowing that handing over this data is an unforgivable betrayal to the group. He simply continues walking out of the room, warning that if she refuses, the agreement will be cancelled immediately. The henchmen advance again with their sharp blades, forcing the young lady to make a quick decision under threat of end. With no other option to survive, she cries loudly and agrees to sign the digital contract in the last available second. The virtual contract is signed instantly, validating the extreme protection agreement between the young man and the young lady right there. Crying with relief, she screams, showing the digital screen, confirming that she signed the document exactly as he wanted. Satisfied, he says that the contract is in force and discharges a powerful blue lightning bolt that hits the enemies squarely in the location. The electric attack throws the henchmen far away with violence, leaving all the adversaries seriously injured on the floor. Ostium remains totally impassive while observing his subordinates fall defeated around him. Neither Nayo cries with emotion and says shyly that she will be counting on the help of her new and incredibly strong protector. The hero smiles in a friendly way while displaying the digital contract and officially calling her his dear client. The protector advances again in the direction of the combat, accumulating a massive amount of electric energy in his fist. He lands an incredibly fast and accurate punch, sending another henchman through the air without the slightest effort. The remaining criminals scream furiously while observing their allies being defeated with such ease. Several opponents attempt to surround him at the same time to try to find some opening in his impeccable fighting style. Ryuushin dodges skillfully and deals a devastating punch that knocks out one more adversary instantly. He continues his ruthless counterattack, knocking down each of the opponents who dare to stand in his way. With fast and precise movements, he defeats easily the waves of criminals who tried to attack him together. 3 dangerous and armed opponents run in his direction, attempting a last desperate push to beat him. The clash between the powers generates an immense bright blue energy barrier that consumes the entire field of battle. But with extreme mastery, the hero liquidates all of them in a few seconds with incredibly powerful electric discharges. Nayo watches everything completely paralyzed and amazed at the level of absurd power of that young bodyguard. She can barely believe that he eliminated so many elite enemies in the blink of an eye and without suffering a single scratch. The girl concludes in her thoughts that that man's real strength surpasses by far all the legends and rumors she heard. She ponders, however, that the guardian Ostium is a completely different adversary with abilities out of the ordinary. The city of Naftaful is known worldwide for sheltering the worst and most wanted criminals in all of history. Precisely because it is an extremely hostile territory, no other bodyguard ever managed to set foot alive in that location. And the main reason for this is the intimidating presence of Ostium, the legendary guardian in charge of watching the entrance. The hero observes the bodies fallen on the floor and notes that now the only remaining enemy standing in that room is the old smoker. Ostium praises the young man's performance, admitting that he didn't expect that he would finish off so many elite soldiers so quickly. He asks if the high-tech briefcase that the hero holds is the source from where he draws all those combat weapons. The old man admits to being very impressed with his versatility, but guarantees that he will never manage to pass through there. A mysterious and dense green smoke starts to emanate from the villain's body while he prepares to release his power. Ryuushin observes with attention that strange energy, trying to unravel which type of secret technique the opponent will use. Suddenly, Ostium's body starts to transform in a bizarre way into gigantic, super-resistant metal plates. The metallic parts unite perfectly, forming an immense barrier with 2 blue eyes glowing in the darkness. The villain himself reveals in an imposing tone that he himself is the legendary physical gate that grants access to the Forbidden City. The hero finds the transformation ability quite interesting and wields his weapon, ready to test its resistance. The immense metallic gate continues growing in size, occupying the entire space of the passage with its colossal structure. The young man runs with total speed, dealing an incredibly strong blow against the massive armor of the Great Gate. He maintains focus on the battle, knowing that he needs to find a way to break that impenetrable metallic barrier. The Guardian's thunderous voice echoes through the environment, guaranteeing that no invader will ever manage to pass through his defense. The hero smiles from the corner of his mouth and asks if he is that sure of it while his right hand starts to glow intensely. He disassembles his briefcase and transforms it into a gigantic high-tech laser cannon to obliterate the obstacle. An immense amount of blue energy starts to be concentrated at the tip of the cannon, generating an incredibly strong glow. The protector fires a powerful and devastating beam of concentrated energy directly against the adversary's armor. The laser cannon hits the center of the immense metal gate, generating an explosion of blue sparks throughout the dark hallway. Rayoshin is a little impressed upon noting that even after the terrible shot, the gate didn't suffer any visible damage. Nayo screams, warning that it is useless to try to break that defense only by using pure attack power due to his armor. She tells that in the past, dozens of security agency leaders united just to try to break his defense. But not even all of them together managed to make a single scratch in that feared guardian's colossal body. Intrigued by the revelation, the young man asks what would be that special condition necessary to open the gate. He inquires the prisoner about the secret, but she confesses, crying, that she really hasn't the slightest idea what it is. Ostium mocks Neo from up high, saying in a mocking tone that that girl's head is completely empty inside. She screams, saying that she is no fool, but the hero agrees with the villain and states that she definitely is. The Guardian says that he already couldn't stand her presence from the beginning, and that he is very happy to finally get rid of her. Indignant, she asks what she did so grave to be hated so intensely by all her companions. The immense metal gate reveals that frivolous and traitorous people like her are the ones he detests the most in the whole world. Ostium says that the date and location of the ambush against Ryuushin were written clearly on the base's bulletin board. He complains that she simply ignored the official schedule and decided to act on her own with her henchmen. Nio is as shocked to learn of the warning, while the hero comments with mockery that now he understands the reason everyone hates her. The Guardian states that she made the same silly mistake by signing the contract with the hero without reading the terms to the end. He screams furiously, saying that foolish people who don't know how to read things right should be eliminated from this world. The girl tries to defend herself, alleging that she is no fool, but the hero counters immediately, saying she really is. She states bravely that she reads 2 books per week, but Rayoshin mocks, asking if those readings would be fairy tales. While they argue, the young man starts to analyze how the activation rules of defensive powers work in the world. He knows that Ostium's special ability consists of creating large gates that connect different dimensions. Since dozens of henchmen pass by there every day, the condition to open the gate cannot be something complex or difficult. The hero deduces that the villain is with so much anger because Neo forgot an extremely simple rule to cross the gate. Suddenly, a crucial detail passes through Ryushin's mind, making him widen his eyes with a great discovery. The young protector observes the immense metallic gate before him with a totally focused look and full of certainty. The girl continues grumbling that she is no fool, but the hero tells her to shut her mouth in a harsh way so as not to get in the way. She complains, asking if he wasn't on her side, but Rayoshin simply warns that he already unraveled the whole mystery. He announces calmly to the immense metal adversary that he discovered the true condition to open that passage. He comments with mockery that the rule is incredibly simple and that now he understands the reason for the Guardian's great fury. The huge iron gate starts to shake slightly, faced with the surprising and sudden revelation made by the invader. The girl widens her eyes, not understanding how the hero managed to decipher the secret of the barrier in such a short time of fighting. The protector starts giving a brief, logical explanation about how special abilities of this world are categorized. The hero explains that the first class of abilities is based on pure attack powers used to destroy enemies. The second big category of abilities is focused on solid defense techniques made to nullify direct attacks. Finally, there are those of the special type with activation rules, very varied according to the complexity of each technique. He exemplifies by saying that in the offensive type, the more complex the condition to use it, the stronger the strike will be. In the defensive type, the functioning is exactly the opposite of what happens with attack powers. Since the special class powers are too varied, he decides to ignore that category to focus on the current problem. Rayoshin deduces that Ostium's power to transform into the impenetrable gate is a technique purely of the defensive type, and judging by the absurd resistance demonstrated against the laser cannon shot, his armor must be colossal. The hero concludes that the condition necessary to unlock and open that huge iron passage must be very simple. He asks if the girl managed to understand the logic, while she begs curiously to know what the great secret is. The young man prepares his bright electric chains, announcing that the answer to that enigma is extremely obvious. He throws the blue energy chains into the air, fastening them firmly to the metal handles of the huge gate. The electric chains tangle with force in the latches, ensuring a solid grip for the movement he will make next. The bright wiring is totally stretched, generating enormous pressure on the two doors of that colossal structure. The hero holds the chains with firmness and reveals that the secret is not to push the structure, but to pull it outwards. The revelation leaves the girl with her eyes widened and with an expression of pure disbelief faced with such simplicity. She says that that is impossible for being too simple, but the hero states that there is no more practical and efficient rule. He explains that all other invaders failed in the past because they tried to break the barrier by force without thinking. Upon dealing direct attacks from outside to inside, the force generated by the rivals acted by pushing the doors even more. Because of this pushing action, the gate never opened, since its only secret rule requires the user to pull it. The hero praises the adversary's genius psychological trick that managed to deceive everyone with such a simple condition. The girl remains incredulous with the silly secret, while the young man warns that he possesses the clearest proof of his deduction. He points his index finger to the metal structure, revealing that it is written literally the word pull there. Totally in shock, the young lady focuses her gaze on the metal lock of the immense gate, trying to see the cited warning. Between the iron handles, there really exists a small detail sculpted that had gone unnoticed by everyone. The word pull was written in a very visible way right in the center of the gap of the two giant steel doors. The safety warning on the metallic plate, indeed, brought the basic opening instructions in big blue letters. The girl is left with a completely silly expression and no reaction upon noting that the answer was always visible. She is enraged and screams, asking who would be the idiot who would write the opening condition exposed for everyone to see. The guardian himself is irritated and screams back, saying that the only truly foolish person there was Nio herself. Ostium asks with mockery when she thinks he took the trouble to write that word on his own body. He reveals irritably that he wrote that warning specifically for her right after she joined tragedy. Nio tries to justify herself, complaining that he could have just spoken out loud instead of writing in a hidden way. The immense metal gate sighs and points out that the girl simply never paid attention to anything around her. In one of his memories, she appears chewing gum and complaining that the huge metallic passage didn't want to open. Even after being warned to pull, she continued pushing and even kicking the structure with much force. The guardian begged her to just pull the latch, but the stubborn young lady continued hitting the metal wall without stopping. She tried everything, hitting her head and using her stick, but always pushing the metal structure in a useless way. The villain is enraged upon remembering that no matter how much he explained the rule, all the allies always did exactly the opposite. Ryuushin agrees with the guardian's anger, saying that there are always people who push when it is written pull. The old man complains that all the other terrorists also ignored the writing and acted like true illiterates. Very awkwardly, she confesses that she really hadn't the slightest idea that that was the only opening condition. The guardian's huge eye starts to shed tears of pure frustration, begging for the young people to learn to read. The hero focuses on the objective and warns the metal adversary that he will make the correct movement to open the passage right now. But Ostium warns that even knowing the secret, he will still use all his colossal force to prevent the invader's entry. The protector displays a challenging smile, asking what the guardian is talking about with such arrogance and confidence. He starts to apply an extraordinary physical force, pulling the electric chains with all his spiritual energy. The metal guardian is frightened upon feeling the absurd pressure of the chains and realizes the incredible level of his strength. The young man gives a last violent pull, stating that a gate that refuses to open should just be called broken. A strong bluish light erupts from the gap of the doors, while Nio screams the name of her incredible protector in the middle of the shine. The young man displays an extremely confident look, declaring that a true gate must open in a triumphant way. The immense steel gate starts to give way, opening completely before the young bodyguard's demonstration of power. Ostium cries with anger, blaming Nio and stating that the failure happened only because of that warning made for her. He screams with hatred, swearing that he will never forgive the girl for the infantile error that exposed the entrance secret to the enemy. Even sweating coldly, she lets out a light laugh of relief for having managed to escape certain end in the last second. On that unforgettable day, the feared and impenetrable defense of the legendary Portal Guardian was completely surpassed. The gigantic iron gate that protected the heart of the criminal base was finally swung wide open before Ryuushin. The hero and his new client observed the liberated passage, ready to start the infiltration plan in the Forbidden City. Carrying the girl on his shoulder, he crosses the portal, completing the first phase of his dangerous mission with great style. Meanwhile, in the urban center, the imposing and luxurious headquarters of the terrorist organization stands out at the top of the buildings. Inside the building, the elite executives of the criminal group start to meet with very serious expressions. They wait silently in the darkness of the meeting room, anxious to start the debate about the site's security. The supreme leader positions himself at the center of the holographic table, noting that all his main generals are present. Joining his hands with firmness, he warns those present that the extraordinary emergency council must start now. He announces with a mysterious look beginning of the debates to trace a new defensive strategy against the adversary. The main theme of the day's agenda is precisely the unexpected and worrying invasion of the legendary Bodyguard in his territory. The president of the tragedy union, named Palmer, assumes the leadership, revealing a very calm and calculating look. He projects images of the hero's combats on a giant screen and explains that his ability is extremely special. The leader reveals that the opponent is capable of storing all his spiritual energy inside the metallic briefcase he carries. And from that stored energy, he manages to materialize instantly a large variety of deadly weapons. One of the group's elite executives asks if that fantastic technique possesses some kind of weakness or limitation. The president replies that the young man very likely cannot create any weapon if he is far from his briefcase. The generals discuss the reason he came there alone, instead of continuing at Ri's side to protect her. One of them points to the hologram of the singer Rai, asking if that girl is really the main target of the current mission. She inquires who hired them to eliminate the idol, since she didn't even appear to be a famous artist in the scenery. The president makes a brief, mysterious pause before answering the crucial question asked by his ally at the meeting. He states with seriousness that the identity of the secret hire is classified information that he cannot reveal at the moment. Silence takes over the room while the elite generals process the mystery that involves that assassination mission. In any case, he warns that everyone must focus on neutralizing the hero before he starts destroying the facilities. Palmer ends his pronouncement, looking at his elite generals, and asks who of them will volunteer for the hunt. Rayoshin arrives at a huge technological city, illuminated by neons that they say is dominated by terrorists. He uses a simple disguise with a mustache and glasses while eating a sweet and observing the local movement. Several citizens walk on the sidewalks and look suspiciously at the pair that just passed by there. The strange behavior of the pair with flashy clothes and disguises attracts confused looks from the people. The young man comments that the location looks like just an ordinary village where normal people try to live in peace. Neo, who is being carried like a sack, asks if he really expected to see explosions everywhere. She begs to take off the heavy disguise, but he warns angrily that their photos are scattered throughout the city. He is surprised to see the villain worry about the innocent civilians who live in that dangerous region. Rayoshin calls her attention to focus on the true objective, while they continue walking down the busy street. The young man confirms if their plan is still to invade the headquarters of the feared criminal organization. She remains in absolute silence and starts sweating coldly with nervousness at the frightening calmness of her protector. Upon realizing his true intentions, the girl screams in shock at his wanting to attack the headquarters. Ryuushin crouches beside her and asks coldly if she has some problem with that invasion plan. She warns desperately that the strongest leaders meet there, but he thinks that this is the perfect situation. The young man asks her to remember her personal protection philosophy, to understand his way of acting. He explains that he prefers to gather all the worst threats in one single place to eliminate them in one single time. The girl asks desperately what he intends to do upon invading such a dangerous place, completely alone. With a sarcastic smile on his face, the young man reminds her that they are two, and not just one as she thought. She screams, saying that she is a terrorist and not his ally, but he insists that she must help him redeem himself. Seeing that he will not change his mind, she suggests that at least they seek some strong allies before going. He counters, saying that the enemies will not stay waiting with crossed arms while they prepare. Rayoshin warns that he prefers to crush the villains before the situation gets out of control and the combat extends. With an intimidating look, he demands that she fulfill the signed contract and take him straight to the big building. The girl is left completely speechless and trembling before the assassin and frightening aura of the protector. In her thoughts, she mocks the contract and plans to betray him as soon as she finds an opportunity for escape. She smiles in a malicious way, believing that that will be the hero's last meal before his total ruin. Her plan is to deceive him and take him straight to the headquarters of the most violent security firm in the whole region. The young lady knows that the criminals think she changed sides, but plans to reverse this terrible misunderstanding. She believes that as soon as she hands over the hero to the local authorities, her reputation as a villain will be restored. She can barely contain the smile upon imagining that Sushi will be able to go back to acting freely as a terrorist. Suddenly, the girl focuses her gaze on a huge digital poster of wanted people that glows on the alley wall. The electronic panel displays the young man's photo for $150,000 and hers for $200,000. Her poster warns that the shot against her is authorized and that they must inflict the maximum possible pain. Rayoshin points to the screen and complains indignantly for her having a reward much bigger than his. She starts laughing loudly, feeling quite proud for being considered more dangerous than the protector. But upon reading the violent details of the poster, she cries with dread and begs to go to the headquarters soon. Meanwhile, in the meeting room, the elite generals demand that the president go personally to the base. The president, with his face marked by lipstick, is completely surprised and indignant at the order of his generals. The subordinates complain, saying they don't usually accept missions when they don't know the client's identity. They insist that as he is the only one who knows who made the request, he must go resolve the situation immediately. The supreme leader remains in absolute silence, with a look of extreme dissatisfaction, faced with demands. Palmer lets out a long sigh and admits that he has no choice but to reveal the secret to his allies. He prepares to reveal the name of the true person behind the attack against the famous and young singer Rai. However, a terrible and violent tremor starts to shake the entire meeting room, interrupting their conversation. Outside, the citizens start looking up, frightened upon feeling the earth tremble intensely. The reflection in the eyes of a resident shows the imposing silhouette of the hero, descending towards the big building. A colossal explosion destroys the top of the luxurious tragedy headquarters, spreading smoke and rubble through the air. The people in the street fall into absolute panic upon witnessing the sudden destruction of the huge building. In the middle of the dust that spreads through the room, the villains are left totally without understanding what is happening. From the destroyed ceiling emerges Ryushin, glowing in blue energy and ready to face all the leaders at once. Ryushin celebrates having found all the executives together, because this saves his work of hunting them one by one. He prepares to start the combat while observing the president of the union, sitting calmly right before him. Palmer mocks the arrogant attitude of the hero, commenting that he really is a man without any salvation in life. Tragedy is known worldwide as the biggest and most dangerous terrorist organization that acts in the shadows. Under the command of President Palmer, the group is managed by 5 powerful and feared vice presidents. The young man prepares his high-tech briefcase, accumulating a large amount of blue electricity in his fists. One of the executives with pink hair smiles and comments that the legendary Bodyguard is even more handsome in person. The hero maintains his cold and focused gaze on the opponents without letting himself be shaken by any kind of outside comment. The other generals also comment about his youth and how daring warriors like that usually pass away early. The mysterious executive with white hair just stares at him in complete silence with her purple glowing eyes. Palmer lets out a loud laugh, surprised by the young man's audacity to invade the enemy territory totally alone. Ryuushin counters, saying that he is accompanied by Neo, while she screams desperately that she has nothing to do with him. The villain suggests that they sit down to talk, but the young man warns that he is not even a little tired to debate. He activates his electric powers and warns that he has absolutely nothing to talk about with mere terrorists. The president only maintains a mysterious and sarcastic smile on his face, faced with the imminent onslaught of the hero. Ryuushin advances with everything, dealing a devastating electric punch directly against the leader of the organization. The young man reaffirms his rigid stance that he never talks with criminals who spread chaos through the cruel world. But suddenly, the hero widens his eyes upon noticing something extremely unusual during the completion of the blow. His electric fist passes through the president's body without causing any real physical damage to the opponent at the table. He retreats confused and asks what type of bizarre special technique the adversary is using to defend himself. Palmer smiles with mockery and reveals to the invader that fizzle projection is nothing but a simple illusion. He explains that it was just a hologram, because the leaders would never meet personally because of an intruder. The hero is surprised and tries to understand the origin of the power that is starting to emanate in a strange way in the room. The hologram warns that he is not yet at the level of facing them while purple smoke emerges from the room floor. Rayoshin notes that mysterious energy is moving quickly to try to restrict his movements. Several purple energy chains start to attach themselves to the young man's body, blocking totally his reaction. The president observes the scene with total satisfaction, knowing that the invader is completely immobilized at the base. The hero's legs are left trapped by the magical chains, preventing him from managing to move or try to escape from there. The young man complains about the irritating ability, trying to decipher to which category that strange power belongs. The villain smiles victoriously, prepares to give one last and valuable information before disappearing from there. He says that because of the courage demonstrated upon invading the location, he will reveal a crucial secret about Ree's idol case. Palmer tells that the true person behind the assassination order against the singer is someone known to him. The bombastic revelation leaves the hero completely shocked and thoughtful about the real identity of that person. The leader says goodbye, saying he hopes the young man lives long enough so they can meet again. Rayoshin is left paralyzed, trying to imagine who from his social circle would desire the end of the young singer Rai. Suddenly, Neo screams desperately, warning that he has no time to be thinking because the danger is approaching. She points to the hole in the wall and screams, terrified that the local security forces are already arriving at the base. The young man holds her again and asks calmly who those new adversaries would be who are coming to attack them. A large convoy of armored military vehicles with sirens on approaches the base location quickly. The girl screams in panic, revealing that the feared marshal's officials have just arrived to capture everyone. Ryuushin repeats the group's military name with an intrigued look without demonstrating any kind of fear or hesitation. The door of the main vehicle opens, revealing the presence of a man wearing a luxurious military uniform. The mysterious official adjusts his tie, commenting calmly that it has been quite a long time since his last mission. The respected elderly commander walks with imposing posture, analyzing the damage caused by the big explosion. Using an elegant monocle, he states that he is anxious to perform a great and remarkable performance today. Nio cries desperately, saying it is the end for them, while the hero questions himself if that man is indeed so dangerous. She warns that the threat level of that elderly official is considered class, leaving the hero somewhat intrigued. He mocks, saying that Class S seems weak, but she explains that that is the maximum classification that exists there. The girl compliments, saying that their organization doesn't usually divide power levels in that common way. She starts explaining that tragedy functions exactly like a corporate company to manage its forces. She explains that the Class D and C members occupy the lowest positions of section chiefs in the company. The warriors, considered Class B, are responsible for commanding the internal departments of the group. Rising in the hierarchy, the powerful class of criminals occupy the important positions of vice, directors, and any level above that is controlled by the Class S elite, whose powers vary in an absurd way. The girl starts sweating with dread upon recognizing the identity of the dangerous opponent who just arrived there. The mysterious man is actually the feared president of the division responsible for all the guild's security. She warns desperately that that elite official possesses a colossal and extremely destructive strength. The elderly commander starts to move his conductor's baton, creating beautiful blue musical notes in the chilly air. With an elegant tone, he pronounces a magic word, pointing his wand directly against the building. A colossal and violent wave of sound destroys the base, causing the hero and the girl to fall in the middle of the chaos. Fallen in the middle of the stones, she cries desperately, believing that that is the definitive end of their lives. The commander positions himself before his soldiers, ready to order the immediate capture of the invaders. He asks with quite calmness for his subordinates to play a funeral song for the poor intruders. The organizational structure of tragedy counts on the president and 5 powerful vice presidents at the top. Right below them are 10 influential directors responsible for managing the group's subsidiaries. She explains the entire complex and rigid corporate pyramid that governs the internal functioning of the faction. In the middle of all this hierarchy are the marshals, who act under the direct command of the feared president. The legendary leader of that elite force, specialized in sound combats, is known only as Mastro. Rayoshin asks calmly what her position in the corporation is, and is surprised to learn that she is a director. He comments with mockery that now he understands the reason for her being so weak, leaving the girl quite irritated. The hero finds it ironic that a terrorist organization speaks of security and questions the opponent's attitude. The young man is intrigued upon noting that that entire army of armed soldiers stopped attacking suddenly. He realizes that the soldiers use musical instruments as weapons. Forming a special combat group, the guards position themselves holding flutes and trumpets, ready to release their destructive sound waves. One of the young musicians of the group holds her metal harp firmly, awaiting the signal to start the attack. Other members of the army tune their violins and cellos, maintaining serious faces and focused on the mission. The hero analyzes the adversaries and comments in a mysterious tone that they are forgetting a vital detail. One of the musicians salutes and warns her leader that the evacuation of the civilians was concluded successfully. Mastro applauds joyfully, praising the good work of the young soldier for ensuring the area's safety. The elderly leader comments that as all the innocents have already been removed from the location, the real combat can start. The tuba shooter suggests blowing up the entire building with the invaders inside, making the girl scream with dread. The commander warns with calmness that there is no need to resort to such extreme and violent methods. He reminds the soldiers that they are the proud warriors of the orchestra and must act with total class. The elderly man asks that they maintain the elegance and the gentleman's posture while they capture the 2 intruders. But the 2 soldiers whisper to each other, suspecting that the elderly leader is perhaps getting a bit senile today. The true and secret reason for him to avoid a big explosion boils down purely to financial issues. It all began on the day that President Palmer called the commander for a serious conversation in his office. The boss complained that the damage caused by the security missions of the elderly leader was going past the limits. Palmer warned with a look of few friends that from that day on, all the repair bills would go to his division. The elderly man was completely shocked and sweating with nervousness upon realizing the immense loss he would have to pay alone. Without knowing anything about that, Ryuushin only asks himself the reason the adversaries are taking so long to attack. Coughing slightly, the commander orders that only a trio of musicians go to the ruins to capture the targets. The three violinists salute, accepting the mission of capture in extremely disciplined way. The other guards question the reason to stay out, but he warns that they will serve only as support. The elderly leader ponders thoughtfully about which attitude to take in relation to the director's situation who betrayed him. The three soldiers advance with firm steps, wielding their violin bows as sharp combat blades. The hero observes their approach from atop the ruins, noting that the rivals finally decided to act. The commander raises his bright magic baton to conduct the beginning of the attack melody of his subordinates. He pronounces the musical command while the violinists prepare to fire a blast of fast sound. An immense barrier of blue sound notes advances with total speed against the hero's position on the roof. The trio of violinists advances with everything, releasing their powerful sound vibrations against the young man. The hero prepares to counterattack, but the girl screams desperately, begging for him to wait a bit. She says that there is something of extreme importance to be resolved before they start the real combat in the room. The violinist clears her throat and starts to read the civil rights, leaving the hero totally confused. Neo despairs and screams, calling the police officer, begging for help in that bizarre situation. The girl states that everything is just a misunderstanding, but Ryuushin provokes her, asking if she is going to abandon him. The officer explains that she received orders to spare her life because her low intelligence would prevent her from being a traitor. She is very happy with the news that she will be taken alive, while the young man only observes the scene with mockery. The girl starts praising at the peaceful conduct of the guards, believing she is totally safe from danger. With tears of pure joy in her eyes, she thanks from the bottom of her heart for the understanding of her allies. She celebrates by screaming thanks to the group of violinists, who starts playing a soft melody in the background. However, the officer continues to read the terms and warns that in case of proven betrayal, the penalty is end. Ryuushin only listens to the pronouncement with much attention, observing the sudden change of weather at the location. The girl is left completely paralyzed and sweating coldly upon realizing that her fate can still be execution. The elite officials turn in her direction, awaiting that she explains her suspicious conduct in the mission. The leader of the trio repeats in an intimidating way that the final sentence of the girl will, in fact, be the fast end. Nyo is irritated and complains about the change of attitude, but the soldiers are furious because she confused them with violinists. The young lady tries to justify herself, saying that she is holding a violin, but the officer smiles in a forced and angry way. She points to the young man with silver hair, saying that he is also a violinist, leaving the young man furious. She insists that the big guy holds a giant violin, leaving the musician who plays cello with deadly hatred. Upon realizing the terrible error she made by insulting the profession of the musicians, she starts trembling with absolute dread. The three warriors release an evil aura of hatred, swearing that they will execute her together with the invader right now. The hero asks if she said something wrong, and she confesses in despair that she committed an unforgivable error with them. The leader of the trio states with pride that she is indeed an elite violinist, and that she prizes her noble instrument. The young man with gray hair explains with a friendly smile that the instrument he holds is actually a viola. The big guy with calm features compliments that his beautiful and imposing string instrument is a cello. The violist warns the hero that he will try to nullify his sentence, but guarantees that the young traitor will have no mercy. The officer sighs sadly, lamenting not having managed to resolve the old ally's case in a peaceful way. She assumes an aggressive combat posture and declares that the immediate execution of the traitor must start now. The trio of strings starts to concentrate an immense amount of destructive energy through their instruments. A violent storm of pink and green energy involves the helpless girl, who lets out a scream of absolute dread. A devastating explosion of sound echoes throughout the meeting room, generating an immense shockwave that shatters the concrete. In the middle of the smoke emerges the hero's voice, warning the opponents that he cannot allow them to take his ally. The young man uses the power of his briefcase of advanced technology to materialize a large blue defense shield. He blocks the sound attack with mastery, saving the life of the girl, whom he considers his valuable client today. He stares at the three opponents, listing with mockery the correct name of each one of the instruments they utilize. The protector points his index finger, stating that he is classifying everyone there as threats that must be eliminated. Meanwhile, from the outside, the elderly Mastro begs desperately for the soldiers to fight with elegance. An immense air pressure starts to make the ceiling of the meeting room shake before the fury of the combatants at the base. The leader of the trio asks if her partners are prepared to release the group's most devastating attack. She raises her violin and announces the beginning of the complex and feared symphony of mass destruction against the hero. Ryuushin focuses his determined gaze on the opponents, concentrating his own blue energy for the imminent clash. The musicians play their first notes, generating dozens of cutting blades of highly destructive pink and green sound. The coordinated attack transforms into a true whirlwind of musical notes that advances fast through the meeting room. The young man activates his briefcase, generating a blue electric dagger, and screams, ordering the girl to wake up immediately from there. With an incredibly fast and precise movement, he cuts all the electric ties that held the young lady on the floor. Finally free from the magic restriction cords, she gets up quickly, ready to try to flee from the danger. The hero warns that he will not manage to protect her and dodge all the strikes at the same time, demanding that she move alone. The girl runs to take shelter, while the colossal wave of destructive sound crashes violently against the barrier. Ryuushin keeps himself firm, dodging and blocking the musical projectiles with his powerful bright blue electric shield. Ryuushin utilizes all the strength of his electromagnetic barrier to support the consecutive strikes of the trio of musicians. He realizes that the real combat is just starting while he analyzes the sound frequencies that surround him. The young man maintains total focus on the air battle, observing the trajectory of each attack launched against his position. He admits in his thoughts that the power level of the opponents is in fact worthy of a great military elite. The hero praises their fantastic performance, describing that onslaught as a divine musical performance. He recognizes seriously that the hidden power behind those combat melodies is in fact frightening and dangerous. The leader of the trio smiles flattered and comments joyfully that the famous Bodyguard has a very refined ear. He jokes, saying that his client is a great professional in that area, which forced him to learn about music. She finds the story fun and praises the young man's good taste in the choice of his clients in a friendly way. The young officer admits to being almost without courage to eliminate him, suggesting that he just surrender without resisting. The young man refuses the proposal, alleging that they are too dangerous for him to allow them to continue acting loose. Neo runs terrified in the background, demanding that they stop praising each other and focus soon on the life or death fight there. The young man asks if she cannot hear the beautiful harmony, but she screams that she is just trying to survive. She begs for him to finish off all of them soon, while the hero laments having to waste such a melody. The girl is irritated with his philosophical attitude while the protector continues analyzing the combat score. Ryuushin explains the theory behind the music, highlighting how the violin acts, leading with mastery the main theme. He compliments by saying that the viola serves as the perfect bridge, connecting the high and low sounds of the song. Finally, the cello gives the necessary support from below, creating simply perfect harmony for the trio. The young man says he could listen to that all day, while the young lady screams desperately that she will pass away if he doesn't act. He calms his ally, explaining that the real problem of that combat is not lack of will to beat the enemies. The young man confesses seriously that in reality, he simply cannot find any opening to attack. Rayoshin explains that their teamwork is too perfect, which prevents any attempt at counterattack. He continues praising the fantastic union of frequencies generated by the perfect combination of those instruments. Without patience, she screams with hatred, telling him to shut his mouth with all that idle chatter of violas and violins. The girl states that all those sounds look exactly the same to her, leaving the three musicians paralyzed. The hero is left completely shocked by the lack of artistic sensibility and the immense bad taste of his ally. The elite officials turn in her direction, with looks of pure hatred after receiving that grave offense. The leader screams furiously, asking how she dares to say that the instruments sound the same and what kind of ear she has. Nio counters, saying that it is all the same thing and that all that talk about harmony is nothing but pure nonsense. She continues provoking the soldiers, stating that the 3-string instruments seem identical to her ears. The offense hits the pride of the musicians, making their hands tremble with fury and the desire for blood increase. They cannot believe the size of the girl's musical ignorance and prepare to punish her in a severe way. She continues screaming and mocking the utility of joining 3 instruments so similar in one single combat group. The leader of the trio warns with a dark voice that from now on, she will play in a way that even she manages to understand. The 3 position themselves, releasing a gigantic evil purple aura to unleash their strikes in an individual way. The first overwhelming attack hits Neo squarely, causing her to let out a deafening scream of pure pain. The violinist explains with hatred that the violin possesses the sharpest sound and is responsible for carrying the main theme. A violent whirlwind of green wind hits the girl again, throwing her body far away with brutality. The second official adds that the viola possesses the medium sound and acts by molding the entire atmosphere and climate of the music. She is hit by one more extremely powerful sound shockwave that explodes the floor around her position. The big guy compliments by saying that the cello emits the deepest tone, being responsible for sound depth. The violinist asks if she finally understood, and the hero responds with irony, saying that it became very clear. Ryushin advances slowly and comments that the skill and individual presence of each one of them is in fact incredible. He highlights, however, that when they fought in perfect harmony, their teamwork was unbeatable. The 3 elite officials are left completely surprised by the sudden tactical analysis made by the bodyguard. The young man explains with a smile on his face that before the provocation, he could barely dodge their attacks. But as now each one of them is trying to shine alone in the ruins, all that perfect synchronization was lost. He moves with extreme agility, dodging easily all the individual sound vibrations dealt. The hero transforms his briefcase into a colossal laser cannon and points the bright nozzle in the direction of the adversaries. The 3 elite warriors fall into absolute despair upon seeing the immense amount of energy that aims at them. A colossal blue energy beam is fired by the hero's laser cannon, illuminating the entire combat scenery. The young man observes coldly his overwhelming sound attack sweep the 3 opponents in the blink of an eye. The commander Mastro and the young clarinet soldier are left completely in shock upon witnessing that blow. The cannon opens a gigantic hole in the building's roof, causing the rebel to fall through all parts. The elderly man despairs immediately and cries loudly upon realizing the immense loss he would have to pay alone. The young soldier screams worriedly upon seeing her 3 elite companions falling knocked out from up high. The officials fallen on the floor receive the desolate look of the commander, who walks in their direction slowly. The rear guard falls into complete panic upon noting that the strongest warriors of the team were beaten easily. They run to check if everyone is still breathing after receiving that terrible and violent electric blow. The leader of the trio cries upon noting that her precious combat violin ended up being completely destroyed. Neo continues celebrating the fact of being alive without worrying about the fury that starts to grow among the guards. The companions of the trio turn in silence in the direction of the intruders, maintaining extremely serious faces. The elderly commander focuses his gaze on the young man, demonstrating fury and a simply frightening grudge. Rayoshin and his companion emerge from the middle of the smoke, demonstrating to be completely unscathed and ready to fight. The elderly man prepares to attack the hero, guaranteeing that he will avenge the humiliating defeat suffered by his trio. Ryuushin mocks the situation, saying that the musicians are still alive and that he can barely wait for the next song. Mastro asks if the spare instruments are ready so that the musicians return soon to the combat. He warns seriously that if they break the new violins, the value will be deducted directly from the salary. The elderly man raises his magic baton again, ordering the entire orchestra to start the elimination symphony. The nozzle of the commander's wand glows intensely, scaring the pair who observe him from afar in the ruins. A colossal storm of colored sound waves is fired with violence against the hero's electric shield. The young man utilizes his briefcase of technology to reinforce the defense barrier, supporting the violent impact. He assumes a firm resistance posture, while the destructive energy of the instruments clashes with force. An immense sound explosion propagates through the entire area, illuminating the ruins of the room with a strong blue shine. The hero notes that the firepower of the adversaries increased quite a bit with the arrival of the new support musicians. He praises the harmony generated by Mastro, to which she screams desperately, telling the protector to just protect her. The young man maintains total focus on the battle, trying to unravel what is the true secret behind those powers. He concludes that the ordinary soldiers possess abilities of the attack type that transform sound into pure energy, and the elderly commander possesses a special technique of the support type that applies great improvements to the entire team. The hero realizes that attacking in a careless way would be a grave error, because there is no evident opening in the rhythm. The young man takes his decision and calls the girl, who observes him frightened from inside his blue protection barrier. Rayoshin orders that she utilize her special ability of provocation to try to break the group's synchronization. The girl is left somewhat confused with the request, but the young man explains that he needs to destabilize the musician's rhythm. He reveals that he is looking for an opening to perform the counterattack, but their melody is too perfect. He says for her to use her specialty and insult the guards any way that comes to her mind right now. Without hesitation, the young lady approaches the edge of the barrier and screams, catching the attention of all the support soldiers. The hero continues holding firm the immense energy shield to ensure her safety during the provocation. She makes a face and starts to scream that their show is horrible and that any child would know how to play much better. Ryushin asks if she is in press school for using such silly and ridiculous insults, but she says she did what he had asked. The hero comments that he doubts a lot that such a childish and ridiculous insult like that will have any real effect. To his surprise, the clarinet soldier is left extremely irritated, biting her instrument with much anger. The young lead musician turns red with hatred while the commander raises the baton to try to calm everyone. Mastro asks that everyone maintains calmness and doesn't let themselves be shaken by such childish and rude provocations. The hero is impressed with the speed of their recovery, and the young lady asks what they must do now. The young man concludes in his thoughts that the ideal plan to win the battle would be to take the commander out of his rhythm. The young man focuses his determined gaze on the magic baton, trying to find a way to destabilize the adversary. The commander performs one more precise movement with his wand, ordering a new and massive attack against the pair. Frightened with the immense sound power, the girl climbs on the hero's shoulders, begging for protection at that moment. A colossal and overwhelming purple energy column collapses upon the barrier, generating a violent shock wave. The young man lets out a long sigh of relief noting that his powerful electric shield managed to block all the strength. Ryushin and the elderly commander stare at each other in absolute silence with extremely serious and attentive looks. The ceiling of the meeting room shakes in a violent way, scaring Mastro with the possibility of new destruction. The elderly man screams desperately, demanding that his soldiers play much more softly and calmly in the battle. He orders rudely that everyone follows the movements of his baton to avoid more damage to the physical structure. The hero observes from above the enemy orchestra, trying to memorize the position of each one of those musicians. Suddenly, a crucial detail passes through the young man's mind, making him widen his eyes with a great idea. The young man warns that it is the allies' turn to act, but she screams frightened, not understanding the reason for having to fight. She complains, saying that there is no chance of winning the gang, and accuses him of wanting to abandon her in the ruins. Ryushin only sighs and warns calmly that he brought her favorite weapon stored in his technology briefcase. The girl is left completely surprised and fascinated upon learning that he brought her valuable combat stick. a large and powerful reddish stick starts to materialize before her with a very intense shine. She holds her favorite combat weapon, displaying an enormous joy for having it back in her hands. She celebrates, laughing loudly, while the young man asks, with seriousness, for her to pay enough attention to the traced plan. Ryuushin starts explaining in detail what will be the counterattack strategy that they must utilize, but the treacherous young lady ignores the plan and jumps to deal a cowardly blow directly against his back. She screams furiously, ordering the hero to pass away at once while she deals her flaming stick attack. However, the blow hits the young man's barrier, and the impact returns with strength, throwing her far away with violence. Fallen on the floor and letting out smoke, she asks in tears the reason that happened with her own attack. The young man explains that he placed a secret clause in the contract that makes any blow against him return to the attacker. The girl is left totally horrified upon realizing that the hero possesses this type of absolute restriction power. She realizes frightened that he is capable of much more than just materializing weapons and runs to prepare herself. Neo wonders how only one single human being is capable of carrying so many absurd special abilities. She tries to imagine what types of terrible physical limitations the young man had to impose upon himself to have that power. In the field of battle, the guards complain, saying their arms are already hurting from so much playing without stopping. Mastro asks to hold on a bit more, noting that the hero's defensive energy is finally running out. The young man keeps himself firm, sustaining his immense blue energy shield while awaiting the perfect moment to act. One of the soldiers suggests blowing up the entire building, but the elderly leader forbids it immediately, fearing the financial loss. Mastro insists that they must maintain the damage at the minimum level so they don't receive Palmer's bill at the division. Suddenly, the hero's ally emerges with her white hair and demon horns released, wielding her stick. The commander laughs loudly, believing that the girl's desperate onslaught will pass as nothing but a silly joke in the battle. He concludes with mockery that the young man gave up attacking, focusing all his strength purely on defensive tasks. The elderly man celebrates upon noting that the group's attack task was left totally under her responsibility. The girl releases her immense hidden strength, concentrating intense flames around her giant combat stick. She assumes a formidable attack posture, preparing herself to deal an extremely destructive blow at the base. The commander accepts the challenge, laughing loudly, and orders his soldiers to increase the rhythm of their shockwaves. She deals her special mountain destruction blow, generating a colossal wave of reddish flames in the air. The colossal impact between the flames and the sound waves generates an explosion of simply devastating proportions. The elderly leader lets out a scream of absolute dread upon noticing the immense destruction that is being generated at the base. He falls into total panic, screaming that they cannot destroy the building, while his soldiers try to calm him down. He widens his eyes, paralyzed with dread upon noticing that he lost total control over the combat situation. Suddenly, the hero emerges flying right behind him and comments in an ironic tone that his musical performance turned into a mess. The young man realizes that the leader was controlling his own strength, only to not damage the commercial building. Rayoshin deals an overwhelming electric punch that breaks the floor and throws the elderly commander straight against the concrete. The devastating impact of the electric discharge crushes the adversary's defense, ending the battle in a definitive way. Standing over the defeated commander, the young man warns coldly that he should have worried about his own life. Ryushin stands victorious before the defeated elderly commander, leaving the other soldiers shocked by the scene. The leader tries to calm his subordinates, saying that he is perfectly fine and that they do not need to worry. The guards complain, saying that it is karma for him having ignored the group's opinions about using full force. The elderly man gets furious and yells at his command, explaining that he did not destroy the place on purpose. He explains that the damages are deducted from their budget and asks if any soldier prefers to pay the bill. Upon hearing about the money, the soldiers change their attitude quickly and ask if the boss is physically okay. Ryuushin finally understands the reason the elderly man was controlling the force of his attacks during the entire confrontation. The commander stares at the young man and comments that he is a very lucky man for having survived the combat. The hero changes the subject, saying that there is still one thing that he simply cannot understand. The young man asks why people with such incredible abilities are wasting their lives as terrorists. The elderly man feels insulted and counters, stating that their work is a totally respectable profession. The leader explains naturally that they only work in exchange for payment, as any other person would do. Ryushin realizes that everything revolves around money, explaining the strange feeling he had upon seeing them. The hero deduces that the lack of percussion in their orchestra is also due purely to budget cuts. The elderly man confirms the cut to save money, while the young man admits that the financial issue really matters. The hero questions if they feel proud to make a living with acts of terrorism instead of living from music. He insists that whoever truly loves art should play to move people in their performances. The elderly man smiles and asks the young man's opinion about the melody they just played during the combat. The leader reveals that the only reason for the hero to have listened to that music was the fact that the president paid for the show. The elderly man remembers that in the beginning, they founded the orchestra with the sincere dream of touching the public's heart. He tells that classical music, unfortunately, is not popular and that the little space that exists already belongs to big names. The expenses with maintenance and salaries were too high, leaving the group on the verge of total bankruptcy. It was at that difficult moment that the president of the organization appeared, extending a hand to save them from closing their doors. Listening to the vent, Rayoshin comments that his client Rai also makes a living working with art. The young man tells that at the start of her career, the young singer also faced difficulties and was not accepted by the public. He reveals that she ended up losing her beloved musical group because of the severe lack of financial resources. Even passing through great difficulties, the girl never abandoned the passion for what she loved most to do. She continued fighting and performing until managing to shine on top of a big stage full of fans. Thanks to her effort, she finally conquered the affection and support of an immense amount of admirers. The hero states with seriousness that it is exactly at this point that the singer differentiates herself from their conduct. He points out that they preferred to choose the path of terrorism in exchange for easy money on the black market. The elderly man reflects in absolute silence about the possibility of having followed a different choice in the past. The elderly man questions himself if there really wasn't another option and asks what is the style of music that Rai usually plays. The young man replies calmly, revealing that his young client actually works as an idol singer. The commander raises his head, surprised by the answer, and repeats the term with disdain in his voice. The hero confirms the information, staring at the opponent with total seriousness in the middle of the ruins. The elderly man turns red with hatred and asks if the hero is in fact comparing their art to such an inferior style. Ryushin shows himself quite surprised by the irritated reaction and the sudden prejudice of the commander. The commander screams, releasing his most powerful attack technique, while an immense energy starts to arise. A colossal pillar of purple magic energy falls from the sky, destroying everything and illuminating the entire scenery around. The young man protects himself quickly, using his arms to endure the immense air pressure generated by the blow. A hand of energy arises in the air, and the elderly man asks if he understands why classical music is a superior art. The hero maintains his eyes focused on the opponent, awaiting the explanation in the middle of the dust that spreads. The leader explains that the first big reason is the long and rich history that this classic style carries with itself. He compliments that many years of hard training and dedication are necessary to become a true master. The commander highlights that the extremely high price of classical instruments is also part of that value. Next, the elderly man questions the relevance of idols, stating that their history is short and insignificant. He says that any pretty person can become an idol without needing to have any true real talent. The elderly man states with contempt that nowadays, even machines manage to do all the work of these singers. With an immense aura of power rising behind himself, the commander declares that the difference between them is gigantic. The elderly man is left extremely furious, screaming that the young man is an arrogant brat for trying to give him moral lessons. The hero only repeats the word with disdain in his look, staring coldly at the elderly commander's prejudice. He asks, smiling, if to be considered high class, the art needs only to cost extremely expensive. The commander states without any hesitation that the answer to that question is yes, and that this is obvious. The young man mentions the old saying that a good artisan should never blame their work tools for the result. The elderly man counters, saying that any artisan would choose the tool of $1 million without hesitating. The support guards prepare in silence after receiving the direct order to attack with full power. The elderly commander prepares to release a frightening amount of energy with his movements. He screams, saying that he will use a technique even stronger and more destructive than any other common melody. The soldiers sweat with worry, remembering that the entire building can be destroyed and the bill will be absurd. The elderly leader assumes a frightening look and guarantees that he will assume all the financial responsibility for the damage. Hearing the boss's promise, the guards change their expression instantly and smile quite relieved. The entire orchestra starts to concentrate a colossal amount of large-scale sound magic at the location. The hero mocks their materialism and confesses in a serious tone that he hadn't been this angry for a long time. He stares at the adversaries with his red eyes glowing intensely, demonstrating his growing fury. The elderly commander points his wand, stating with arrogance that the numbers never lie on the field of battle. He boasts about having hired extremely expensive artists with the best instruments in the market. He orders that everyone release the maximum power of their sound notes to crush the intruders once and for all. The young man opens his high-tech briefcase and comments that their orchestra seems to be needing a drummer. The enemy leader stares at him intrigued, while the hero prepares his technological counteroffensive in the middle of the chaos. He materializes a powerful drumstick of blue energy and warns that that special item does not possess a market price. The elderly man accepts the challenge with a look of pure mockery, telling the young hero to attack with everything he has. The commander gives the definitive signal to start the biggest and most destructive energy clash of that night.